And just confirming the motion for this round is this house prefers to be born in 100 years' time instead of today. Yeah.
Without further ado, I'd like to welcome up the first speaker of the affirming team. Sorry.
Barrier to my success. Oh god. This tie is going to be so annoying, I can already tell. Alright. We think that a kid born into a war-stricken country would literally give anything to have this opportunity to go into the future 100 years from now, where maybe they are less likely to have to go out and find and forage food for their family, or have the possibility to actually live because they're dying of malaria. Let's start with a little bit of sense. So we have a principle about why having a fulfilling life is actually principally important, and a substantive of about why you set a higher quality of life in 100 years. So what does our world look like? As an individual, we would have the choice to actually be born in 100 years. So what does this look like? It looks like a fresh start. This means that you get the informed ability and get the ability to actually assess the harms and create a preference in this case. So we start fresh with no recollection of choice. So what does their world look like? It means existing in the status quo. It looks like being born into possibly a increasing poverty, war-ridden countries, the middle class that has established a cost of living crisis, and conflict in countries that we're seeing all across the world at the moment. Note that the odds of being born into a struggling household is higher in the status quo. And even if you do have the minute chance of being born into the rich minority, we still think that the opportunity to actually be born 100 years into the future increases that self-same opportunity. So even if we have to establish that there are still global harms. This looks like the struggle of day-to-day life. They haven't found a solution to global issues such as climate change or war in this case. And then it looks like the cure to cancer, which could possibly be achievable in 100 years' time. So what are the preferences of this house? It looks like a reasonable quality of life. It looks like the assurance of lineage, so the knowledge that your future is actually secure. And 3, it looks like the purpose of having a purpose in life. And 4thly, it looks like the feeling of contribution. We win this debate today if we prove that this choice is in the individual's best interest in this case. So, as an individual, you would have a high quality of life in our principle. So this means that even if there is only a marginal chance of our increased quality of life, you as an individual have a principal right to pursue that, even if it is at the cost of other people. So we see this already in today's society. This looks like the parental sacrifice that incurs. This looks like mum that doesn't go out to her nightly book club. Instead, she stays at home and sacrifices her night to actually teach you something, let's say biology, or practice for a test. Secondly, on a larger scale, it looks like utilitarianism and morality. So taxpayer money. Taxpayer money goes towards stuff like affirmative action that is an expense to society. It goes to the opportunity to give people a higher quality of life. It looks like USAID, which is not even in some people's scope. They don't even see the benefits. However, in overseas countries, we know that we are actually giving people a higher quality of life, even if it comes at our own expense. So, if we care about this principle of helping others, we also see this with regards to the decile system that we see here today. This looks like giving funding to education into lower decile schools that have lower income to improve their quality of life and try and lift them out of that poverty. See, looks like affirmative action. So, like I said before about Americans and affirmative action and reducing the poverty that we have. This, as a society, if we have the ability to have the opposition to have an opportunity to have a higher quality of life, individuals have that self-same right to a higher quality of life. So this looks like life is short. We should have the ability and the right to actually enjoy that and pursue the things that we want to in this case, and we think this is principally important in this debate. Even if this comes at the expense of our society or third parties, we as social human beings have a sense of duty to others that we must ensue, and also to ourselves, which we then go and expand into the world, even if it comes at the cost of your mother that doesn't like you going off to college, but because you feel that purpose in yourself, you go off to college because it is in your personal benefit. So, This means that in this debate, we have a principal obligation to prefer this and the potential that we have a higher quality of life. So starting off with my first substantive. So what are the harms that exist in the status quo? Actually, I'll accept this POI at this time.
How can you prove that these current issues of things such as climate change and poverty wouldn't be worse in 100 years' time when the population...
I'll establish this in my substantive. So what are the harms that exist in the status quo? One, climate change. So we are seeing the effects of this now. So we are at this point in time, we're at a tipping point of society. So how are you to say that you born now would have any change in that matter? Secondly, social harms. We have the we have a rise in right-wing extremist racism. This looks like social toxicity, and that we are grappling with new concepts such as social media and such as social online harm that is prevalent in today's society. Looks like the new iPad kids that we are getting at the moment. 3, it looks like international instability. This looks like tariff wars, India versus Pakistan, Russia versus Ukraine, and Israel versus Palestine. 4, financial struggle. So lots of people are actually subject to poverty. This looks like the cost of living crisis. Like I said before, even the middle class and the upper class are still seeing the effects of this today. So how are we to assume that on their side any of this would change? So anyone in this day and age actually is affected by this, and it is their burden to prove that this would actually change on their side of the debate. So why are they unlikely to fix these harms if they are born today? One, they are only one person. Their capacity and outreach is actually limited. Their ability is impacted by the chance that they are born into their ability is impacted by the chance that they're not born into impoverished Africa, but instead born into rich upper-class America. Secondly, issues are less likely to be out of your scope. So the average person is not likely to be a climate activist or a super smart scientist who is actually going to fix the ozone layer and solve all of our climate issues. They can't just click their fingers and stop these changes that have been rolling on for the past couple of years. 3, issues take time. Russia isn't just going to actually end. The Russia conflict isn't going to end overnight. Trump, who is arguably one of the most powerful people in the world, couldn't stop this war that he campaigned about stopping in 24 hours. What makes you think that any of their solutions with one person's capacity, even if they are the most powerful person in the world, is going to change on their side of the debate? And then why is there a better quality of life on our side of the house? One, we have more time for issues to actually be resolved. As we've seen, with regards to climate change, a couple of years ago, people didn't even believe that climate change existed. We are slowly getting more and more buy-in. So in 100 years from now, who's to say that not the entire world is rooted around this singular problem? However, at this time, we just don't have enough buy-in to actually create that change. However, in 100 years from now, this person that we have become is actually going to have a tangible impact in society other than now just being the lone wolf that is crying out against climate change. Secondly, society is constantly innovating. At the very least, we get some beneficial change. This looks like reflecting on the harms and taking steps to actually fix them. So even if we can't fix these harms, we actually improve their quality of life. One, we get more technology. This looks like space exploration, a new renaissance of thought, uncharted territories where our children can actually go out. If we are, we can grow up to be a scientist and explore the universe. We have opportunity for technology to be able to go to Mars or to go to Jupiter or find the new cure to cancer. These opportunities are actually improved on our side of the house, and they are not bound by the technological limits of today's society. 3, we get more social welfare. This looks like a cure to cancer. It looks like a person that is born with an incurable disease in this life, having the opportunity to go to that life and find that there actually is a cure. 3, it looks like global unity. We have a trend of unification. This looks like at the start, we had a band of nomads who were killing each other on sight. However, this turned into villages, turned into cities, turned into actual nations, and we see this global change of unification. So on our side of the debate, 100 years from now, we can all be one happy family. And 4, we have more capacity for personal fulfillment. This looks like more innovation, more opportunities. All of these effects are uniquely appropriated to our side of the debate, and it is their burden to prove that not only will these things change, but they will also be incrementally better on their side of the debate. Cheers.
Exactly.
We think that society is in a better state currently than it ever will be 100 years from now. And so on our side of the house, we think that, like, that it's completely unfair to say that, like, it's just going to have, like, we're going to turn into, like, one big happy family in 100 years' time. Okay, 4 things for you on my speech today. Firstly, on rebuttal. Secondly, on setup. First substantive point will be on how you'll be born into a better functioning society in, like, the status quo. And secondly, on how you'll be born into a better environment on the status quo. Okay, firstly, on rebuttal. What did we hear from App? Okay, we heard, firstly, that they're going to, under our side, we've got lots of current, like, problems, such as climate change, such as, like, the rise in right-wing politics and racism, such as financial struggles, war, poverty, and they said that this is going to be fixed on their side due to more technology, more social welfare, more unity, things like that. Firstly, on this, I think they were quite assertive on saying that all of these benefits are going to be reaped on their side, because they didn't actually prove how these benefits are going to come about. There was a big gap missing in that 100 years explaining how we're suddenly going to go from, like, this war-stricken, like, terrible society that they've painted us as to this, like, one big happy family unity. Like, there was no mechanising there explaining how exactly that is going to happen. So I think that sort of falls out there. All right. Secondly here, on setup, okay. I pretty much agree with our setup and, like, saying that, you know, people want to have a fulfilling life and people want to, like, enjoy their life and have a high quality of life. We also think that people, like, want to have purpose. The second thing that I need to talk about here is just basically the needs and wants of humans and how human behaviour actually works, right? Like, the basic foundation of economics, right? We literally have a limited number of things in the world and people have, like, unlimited wants, which means that, like, eventually you are going to get, like, to a point where it means that, like, people just can't have all of their wants met. You're not going to have, like, all of these resources. And we think this is something that's really, really important and needs to be thought about really highly. So first point here on the function of society. So what is the context here? Firstly, I think that we've seen, as Af said, that there have been a lot of recent, like, threats to democracy and things like that, which people have been protesting against and have actually had the ability to, which is something that goes on to Okay, first make on how you'd be born into, like, a better functioning society on our side. Firstly, like, most democracies are still functioning, right? Like, right now people actually have, like, certainty in their democracies, right? Like, people still have, like, the safety to make, like, decisions and the safety to vote within their countries. And we think, like, in, like, these democratic countries, which is where we think this debate, like, mainly takes place. Secondly on here, what do we think the comparative is, right? Like, as they've said, like, the world is shifting to, like, more extreme politics, which are becoming, like, higher on the global stage. So we think the comparative here is this, that this shift is just going to keep increasing. How we think this is going to happen is literally, like, when you've got these more extreme political views being valued, like, people literally just vote more extreme leaders in. The media shares these views more because it's what's being fed into, and we think this is just going to keep, like, developing throughout our society. So 100 years time on the comparative, we think this is just going to look like these views becoming more extreme and becoming, like, a more divided society, a more racist society, a society with more extreme views. Second mechanism here on technology, right? We think under our side that technology is not majorly weaponized against people, right? We think under our side technology is actually being used in a lot of ways to help people and benefit people. This looks like helping people with their jobs, being more efficient, helping people's productivity, literally helping people communicate with people from across the world. The factor of just, like, entertainment, right? Keeping people entertained and making sure they have fun because they can, like, go on their phone and look at a funny video. And we think this assists people in a lot of ways and isn't harmful. On the comparative, we think that technology is going to continue developing, but we don't think it is necessarily going to keep developing for the good, right? We think 100 years from now, when technology has been developed and changed so many times, it is just going to literally be all that people's lives revolve around, right? And we think this is actually going to be very, very harmful for people, right? Because it means that on the comparative, people literally won't have the ability to disconnect from technology. People will be constantly stuck in this, like, dopamine cycle of, like, being dependent on technology and needing technology to, like, do their jobs, and that's all they can think and, like, function with is, like, revolving around, like, needing their computer in front of them. Whereas on outside, like, you still have that ability to, like, disconnect from technology. You don't need to utilize, like, technology or, like, things like AI in every single aspect of your life. So we think this just means that under our side, people's well-being is going to be way better off. So what are the impacts of this? Firstly, people have their rights and have their freedoms, right? Like, people still have the ability to, like, vote and just live in a democracy where they have choice, and we think this is really important because it means people have like a high quality of life. Secondly, people have access to like free thinking and free information under our side, right? Because you've got like social media and you've got like technology where people are able to share their opinions. You've got democracy where people are able to vote, which is really, really important. Thirdly, people have like efficiency and assistance in their lives, like, which is benefiting their careers, which is like just being like overall assistant and like helping them be more productive without it being like dominating in their field and dominating in their lives and actually like affecting their well-being. Okay, I'll take the POI briefly.
You said that there is a certain certainty in democracy today. Then you literally just contradicted yourself by saying that it's more likely to become extreme right. So that how do you compare these two statements that you've made?
I'm saying that there's less certainty in your future. As I've just explained, I think this is going to likely become like more dominant in your future 100 years from now. I think this harm is way less under our side. Okay, second point here on environment. Firstly, on context, right? I think we can like acknowledge that there is definitely damages to our environment currently happening, like things such as climate change. First mechanism here on how outside you'd be born into a better environment. Firstly, on pollution, right? Like literally just pollution in the air, like chemicals going into the water. It's currently at like a manageable state where it's not like completely overbearing people's lives and like affecting our waterways to the point where it's like you can't drink water and things like that. So the environment is still like in a state where it's currently like healthy for people to live in, which is really, really important. Secondly, on access to resources, right? Currently, people have like access to an abundance of resources. This looks like things like oil, which are used in the production of like every single good that you use in your life. At the moment, we aren't on the brink of like running out of resources, which is really, really important because it means that people can access everything that they need to have a fulfilling life and to live a comfortable life. What do we think the comparative looks like here? We think that with an ever-growing population, which is probably going to be like triple the size in 100 years' time, and only having limited resources on Earth, limited space on Earth, this means people are probably going to literally be like rationed for the amount of like oil that they're able to use, for the amount of goods that they have access to. We think this means that people will overall just have a lower quality of life because they won't be able to access the same amount of food. They probably won't be able to access the same amount of clean water. Things are probably going to be far more expensive because they're trying to divide this tiny amount of resources across like 20 billion people. Thirdly here on population growth, like people have currently like access to space, the ability to move like freely and just to like have their own space and have things like family freedom, right? We don't have like one-child laws dominating every country. On the comparative, we think, as I've just said, when you have population booms and limited resources, this means you're probably going to see like measures being put in place to restrict your population so people aren't dying because they're being starved of resources, right? So this probably looks like more one-child policies being implemented. We've already seen this being implemented in China, right? And we think this is really, really harmful. So what are the impacts of this? Firstly, on our side, people just feel like more certainty and able to fix problems because we're at a point where like any environmental problems, there is still like a hope to be able to fix this. Thirdly, on quality of life, like people have freedom to move, freedom to still like have families and have space and have access to all the resources that they need, and that's why we think this should fall.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and I'll welcome up the second speaker of the Affirmative.
on side F, we refuse to believe that a world where children are victims of war and are starving to death is the best possible state that our world will ever exist in. This is not a world you can possibly stand for. Even if there is only the potential for a better quality of life for our child, we will take that alternative. There is no way we would stand for a world where there is no possibility for that to occur. So a couple of points to break down. Firstly, on the new future harms that were presented by Neg, then why we're likely to change on our side, and then finally why harms would be less powerful in the future, and then I'll give a split on why you can contribute more to society in the future. So firstly, on the new future harms. Look, we heard a push here about how like people just become addicted to technology and you get these addiction cycles and it takes away their freedom. A few responses here. Firstly, we think they have more natural desires that would prioritize this. I think it's not in humans' nature to just sit on a couch and spend their whole day on reels. It's more likely that due to their biological urge to have kids and have a lineage, they want to prioritize family, they want to prioritize a social life, they want to pursue their passions. Jacob told you about like all of our mechanization on how they have more opportunity to pursue their passions. It's likely they take up the opportunity for a higher quality of education and to pursue a passion in the arts that is now like freed up by technological advancement. They want to have that sense of fulfillment and material contribution to the world. I think it's a very unfair characterization to believe that the entire of civilization spends their whole life on reels. Secondly, we have more understanding of technology. This means that like on the negating side, they've only just been introduced to the concept of like the iPad kid, right? People are still becoming familiar with what dopamine addictions are and how they can affect people. It's likely that when you're like suddenly inserted into 100 years in the future, people have a better understanding of this and like people are more aware of the harms of addiction. But thirdly, we think we can weigh these potential harms over the opportunity for technology to be good. For example, it's highly likely that there's at least been advancements made towards like curing cancer or other serious diseases. So even if you believe that people are addicted to technology, I think we can weigh this against the ability for them to have a longer and higher quality of life because they have like more medicine or better technology to support them. So then on this extremism, I think this is largely symmetrical to their side of the house, where they have like extreme populists like Trump and like the AFD who are still like perpetuating these like extreme far-right narratives into society. I think at least there is an equal amount of risk of this extremism on their side of the house, but we think it's more likely that on our side, people have become more educated. They know the harms of, like, they've seen the bad effects of Trump putting tariffs on the rest of the world because of his like defensive strategies, so they understand better that maybe they shouldn't just buy into buzzwords. So then on overpopulation, a few responses here. Firstly, we think that like more tech is just more resources. People have the capacity to cater to more people. They have a better understanding of how like to purify water more efficiently and to distribute it more efficiently. But we think also maybe like on the long shot they've like had more like space advancements and we've discovered this other planet with unlimited resources. Even if there is the potential for that to happen, once again in their world in the future they just like there's like people who are thirsty, who are starving. Like even if there's only the potential to find this faraway planet with unlimited resources, we would opt for that world. But secondly, we think that there is an aging population and that overpopulation is likely not a long-term issue. People do have a better understanding of it. This looks like China putting like a limit on how many kids you can have. People know the harms of that. So we think here we've disproven all of these future harms, which is like what all of their case is contingent on, because we told you that we can win off just the potential benefits. So if there are no potential harms, then that's a world that we should prefer. So then why are we likely to change on our side the issues that we've like sort of characterized? Firstly, issues take time to change. This is something that Jacob gave you like a lot of mechanization on. I think it was largely assertive for them to tell you that we can't achieve any change to our harms. We told you that like they do have the capacity to put resources into this in the long term, things like climate change and like these extremely large issues do take time to develop. We can't just suddenly fix the ozone layer. Secondly, there's like human development. It's in our nature to find solutions to problems, but innovation does take some time. There's a great chance that at some point in the future we do fix these issues. So we think we have sufficiently told you why they will be able to change those things. And then why are these harms like less powerful in the future? We heard like a big push here about like climate change and how it's just going to be like a wasteland on our side of the house. Look, I think even if this is true, the harms would be symmetrical because like no, in the status quo they have like bush wildfires that are like burning people's houses down. They have people who don't have access to water. Like they have all of these huge issues that they have to cop about climate change. But we did tell you that firstly, we have more like social unity towards climate change. Like in the future when people aren't spending all of their time in warfare, they like can actually like come up with some cooperative solution to climate change and like create some actual traction towards that. But secondly, that we have more resources and innovation that go towards this. Once again, we think that even if this is only a potential benefit, we can still win off this because on their side, nothing changes. You live in a world where you don't have access to those resources and where climate change is an active harm. They didn't accept it, like they didn't really acknowledge our characterizations of how climate change actually does affect people. It does look like people's houses being burnt down. It does look like wildlife in the water like being killed. It does look like islands literally sinking. At least if there's some potential to fix that on our side, we would opt for that world. But even if there are bad harms, I'm going to tell you with my split on why you have the potential to create more change on our side. Yeah, I'll take PO1.
What about humanity's like increasing dependence on things that are mass produced, which probably shows it would only get worse, especially with the cost of living crisis that your first speaker brought up?
What? Things can still be sorry, I don't think I really understand the POI. I think things can still be mass produced on our side. Like we have more resources to put into that. I don't really understand what you're getting at there. So, and actually before I move on to my split, I just want to reiterate our principle on how like it's societally like you're principally obliged to prefer this world because it is in your best interest to opt for fulfillment. We told you why that even if there is a social expense, you should still opt for that, and you're obligated to do that. So then on why you're more likely to have social contribution. So again, we don't think that harms are going to be fully eliminated in the future. We think that there's a potential that they are, and we think that world is great. That's something that they do still have to acknowledge. But we think that even if there are harms that still do exist, it's more likely that we can create that change in the future. So why do you have a greater opportunity to create meaningful change on our side? Firstly, you're more likely to start off on a better foot. This means that you're less likely to be born into adversity. Like on Neg, there is a majority middle class. People are living in like a cost of living crisis and are impacted by global struggles like petrol prices increasing because of like Russia, or like just general goods increasing because of Trump's tariffs, or at most like they are living in severe poverty. They have war-ridden countries and global poverty. But secondly, they have greater opportunity for education. This means like due to human advancements and innovation, they're more likely to gain a more in-depth knowledge in order to make change. And then thirdly, we think that because there are less like widespread issues, they have more time. There's like less opportunity cost of fighting those issues, and they can actually just invest in creating change. This means you not only get like societal fulfillment of creating change, but personal fulfillment of doing something meaningful with your life.
I'd like to thank the speaker for his speech, and now welcome up the second speaker of the Negating team.
Can I get the... Wait. That's okay. Wait, I need that stuff, sorry. Oh, can I get the timer? Side affirming is trying to push that this one individual in this debate has the capacity to literally change the entire course of our world, and they say that it is our burden to bear this. I do not think that this falls within the constraints of the motion. I don't think this one individual has the capacity, like, on their own to, I don't know, discover the cure for cancer and, like, gain all these benefits that's trying to be pushed. And also, I don't think that this is going to be about, like, yeah, anyway. Okay, going on to some rebuttal. I have, firstly, rebuttal on, like, the stuff around climate change. Secondly, on, like, what are the actual chances of having this better life. Thirdly, population and overpopulation. And thirdly, political extremism. And then I'll get onto my point on, like, access to medicine under our side. Okay, so what if we actually heard under, like, the status quo from State Affirming? They say we have issues like things like climate change, we have social harms like right-wing dominance, wars, and poverty. Firstly, on the poverty, I'm not convinced that there's going to be any less poverty in the future. It is literally like the cycle of humanity. We have always had extreme poverty and poverty in, like, every society of humanity. So the odds of this person being born in, like, I don't know, a really poor country or in a world where, like, they just have, like, a bigger disadvantage are probably going to be equal. So all the material given on, like, oh, this person might be born in, like, I don't know, somewhere like Africa where they have no access to healthcare is completely, like, unfair and probably just symmetrical. Secondly, I'll get onto the climate change in my point, and I'll get onto, like, right-wing dominance and wars into my other rebuttal. Okay, so what have we actually heard around political extremism? So we heard that, like, there isn't much of a threat under their side of the house of political extremism because people have knowledge and they're going to stop buying into propaganda. If only this were the case. Knowledge does not lead to immunity to propaganda, and we literally see that in our age right now. You see, like, a mass onslaught of people voting for someone like Donald Trump. This is, like, a massive country that's supposed to be, like, educated and relatively, like, developed, yet they're falling for these levels of propaganda. And the reason, why we think it's going to be so much worse is because, like, propaganda is going to develop. Just as, like, I don't know, research into, like, cancer is going to increase, I think research into things like psychology is going to increase, right? And these people, like, have access to that anyway. So if they want to understand how to, like, make someone believe in, like, your crazy ideas, I think it's probably going to be greater. They've also said that, like, they've also said that, like, people are less likely to, or that this extremism is less likely to happen because we've got world peace. I don't really know, maybe I've missed it, but there's been no material actually given as to why we're going to have, like, world peace and no one's going to fight anymore, because once again, this is the cycle of humanity. We have war happening all the time, and I don't think that this is going to be a benefit that they can claim whatsoever, right? We see technological advancements, so though we do still have war on our side, what do we actually have? We have the fact that if you are born into a secure democratic country, you can probably be fairly certain that your president is not going to, like, I don't know, go start bombing Ukraine, right? Like, we have that certainty. What happens if you're born in 100 years? If you have, like, I don't know, a random dictator like you see in Mickey 17, who's going to try and, like, I don't know, send you to another planet or, like, do all of these things. At least in our near future, that's, like, I don't know, the estimated lifetime, we have things like climate change is probably not going to wipe out the entire population. We cannot say for sure that in 100 years this is going to be the case. That is what our unique benefit is in this on our side. So, okay, yes, maybe we do have some harms, but I think both sides have harms. We just have the level of certainty that they just cannot claim. And if they try to claim that, I think it's just going to be a completely ridiculous statement. On to overpopulation. They said, you know, this isn't a risk because we have an aging population. I think in 100 years' time, I don't actually care what the, like, aging population is in 2025, right? What I do care about is the baby boom that happens when everyone goes, oh my gosh, we need more people on the planet, right? So just as you said, and, like, we also heard that there's, like, one-child policies in China, and so this doesn't exist anymore. Like, get up to date with global politics, please. So, like, these removals of these one-child policies, obviously they're great in terms of humanitarian, but what this actually means is people are just going to start having more children eventually because you have that biological need to have a family. That is, like, what every living organism wants to do. We also heard that, like, people are going to be more educated now because of like better technology. Yes, I'm sure that the upper classes are going to be more educated in this future dystopian society. However, I do not think that people who are born as lower class citizens are going to get an equal opportunity at education. And the reason for this is we're seeing like an even more like capitalistic society, or an even more like segregative society, where the wealthy have like this superior lifestyle and your average person is not. However, under our side, you're still seeing kids like being able to attend a public school. There is just a lot less certainty on their side that this is going to be the case.
Point of information.
Now onto like climate change. So we heard that like currently we get wildfires, and this is really bad. Obviously wildfires are bad, no one's going to dispute that, but I think there is a major difference between a few wildfires and a full-blown climate crisis where you can no longer leave your home because the air that you are breathing is toxic, right? On our side, yes, climate change might reach a point where it becomes irreversible. However, we will not see the full extent of this harm until, like, I don't know, the end of that generation that this person's going to be born into.
Point of information.
We also heard that like there's more buy-in into stopping climate change anyway. Okay, I have a few responses to this. If we do get more buy-in to climate change, I think it's going to be a lot later than what is actually needed. We need buy-in right now. This is the critical point where we need to stop climate change. We cannot say, oh, it's okay, in 50 years more people are going to want to buy into it. The only reason more people are going to buy into it is because they are experiencing maybe some more effects than they're currently experiencing. But anyway, the people who have the capacity to create change to, like, I don't know, things like climate change probably aren't likely to want to do this, right? Because they have financial benefits to gain in the harms to our climate. I'll take a point before moving on to my split.
You unfairly claim that we would have no societal change. However, 100 years ago, women literally could not vote. Now they can be bosses of their own company. Is this not?
Yeah, I
proof
think
that
that's great.
society can
So
change?
what we actually did end up happening is we shifted from a right-wing world to a left-wing world. Now we're seeing the reverse of that shift. We are seeing a shift back into our right-wing society. And what is so uniquely harmful is we saw the extreme capacity for change over the last 100 years. Who's to say that this capacity for change isn't likely to be reversed, right? And we see this by the extremist leaders that we see all around the world, and the fact that people are literally giving them power and giving the capacity to create this change. So I think that doesn't really stand. Okay, now on to access to actual medical. I think under our world, or the status quo, like, no one's dying of the common cold. If you see your friend Sammy walking down the street and coughing, you're not going to go, bye-bye, my bro, I'm really sorry for that. What we do see is that medicine is becoming more elitist. It is becoming harder and harder for people to access like cures and treatments, right? And once again, it's not to the point where no one is able to access medical treatments, and I don't think it's going to reach that point until we probably get to that 100-year point where there's like more extreme wealth inequality. So what actually ends up happening under their side is you're going to see restricted access to healthcare because of this resource depletion, which hasn't actually had any interaction other than, it's okay, there's a planet with infinite amounts of resources. And then also we're going to see worse outcomes for this actor if they are born into like a lower class world. For this point, make my stand. 4.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech, and now welcome up the third speaker of the Affirmative.
I think it's fair to say that a large portion of people born 100 years ago that had to suffer through things like racism, lack of accessibility to medical advances and education would rather have had a chance to have that possible more fulfilling life they would have had if they're born today. I think it is the negating team's burden to prove that would not apply to the same as being born 100 years from now. Yes, there will still be issues 100 years from now that we're facing today, but I think that the benefits that we've already characterized far outweigh any possible harms that could be on our side, and I haven't seen how any of those harms aren't symmetrical on either side anyway. I'm going to go through two clash points on the difference between societies 100 years from now and here and environmental changes. They talked about how people are voting more extremist, we're switching back and forth, we were going more left wing, but now we're going back to more right wing, and everyone's voting more extremist, so it's better to be born now before it gets really bad. I think as I said, people I'd say it's pretty fair to say that in the early days of modern society it was pretty right wing, and then it went left wing, and now it's going back right wing. I think if you're looking at that, you could probably then argue that it's just going to go back to left wing, it's going to keep changing, because as things happen and people react to things in the world, people are going to be changing their opinions. But also I think people are voting more. I think it is likely that things will start improving, because if you look at the whole point of teaching history in schools is so we can look back and learn from what the human race has done wrong in the past. I think it's unlikely that people are going to vote for another Trump that's going to start starting up tariff wars with China and trying to buy Canada. I just think that's unlikely. Even if you do believe people aren't learning from this thing, we're going to go keep going more extremist. In 100 years, our child will have to live with another Trump. I think that's clearly symmetrical. Yeah, maybe there'll be another version of Trump in 100 years, but there's a Trump right now, isn't there? So I don't see how there are any sort of harms on our side that also aren't on this side. So then if that is symmetrical, I think that then you should need to weigh up all the other benefits that we get with things we've already characterized that I'll go into more technological advances. They talked about how people at least they have free thinking now. I think a lot of the benefits they got on the societal level was at least they have this now to some kind of level, which I think one is inaccurate, but as Ollie said, that's just not good enough. Why would we want us as a person choosing to live now and then our future generations to have to live in a world where it's bare minimum, just slowly getting worse? I think that we shouldn't stand for a world like that, and I think people are getting arrested for protesting about stuff that happens in Gaza. People don't have the ability to have free thinking now. And I think if you look in the past, it was even worse in the past. So I don't see in any way why it wouldn't be on a road to getting better. If you look how Jacob was talking about how people didn't used to believe that climate change even existed. So people that when they did talk about climate change, people get mad and be no, it doesn't even exist, so it doesn't matter. But now people are more accepting that because they've seen the actual effects of climate change. I think the same thing will happen with other issues. Therefore, as time goes on and people grow more accepting to the issues that people are protesting about, etc., there will be improvement in protesting free thinking, etc. So I think it's unlikely to say that there'll be a lack of free thinking in 100 years because everyone's going super extremist. They talk about how we're going to be heaps more reliant on technology in 100 years and people won't be able to connect on any other sort of level. I think that that's sort of unrealistic. I think people are pretty reliant on technology now, as you have with iPad kids. And the reason why iPad kids are so prevalent, or the concept of them is so prevalent, is because they're the first generation to grow up with an iPad shoved in front of them from as soon as they're out of the womb. They're the first generation. There's not enough information of we need to be limiting screen time. That sort of information is just coming in more and more as we see the effects. And obviously that's going to keep improving over 100 years. And even if you believe that people are going to be super reliant on technology and be being born 100 years means our kids will be start watching Cocomelon all morning, I think everyone here would agree that they'd rather have be raising an iPad kid, but if that kid then has if they get cancer, etc., they then have a better opportunity to survive cancer because of the technological advancements. I think technological advancements maybe there are some marginal harms being a bit addicted to reels, but at the end of the day the way larger benefits massively outweigh those. So onto the I'll take your POI now.
On technology, don't you think that the way it's purposed to keep people dependent means that the harms that we see now from dependency is just going to be completely exaggerated once you get to 100 years?
I think the harms that we see now are going to be the things that help improve what it's going to be in 100 years. Because maybe people will everyone will leave university and everyone will maybe we shouldn't have used ChatGPT for so many assignments, and that kind of thing will enable more restrictions to be put in place. If we don't make those mistakes in the first place, there's no way for us to improve. So I actually think that the harms that they're that the negating side is characterizing actually benefits our side, because it's showing that we will learn from these mistakes so many other things in the past. And I think, once again, even if we don't learn from those things, I'd rather have my kid survive cancer and be an iPad kid than like go play on a playground but then die from cancer at age 10. So moving on to the environment, yeah, I'll take PY.
What's the point of your child, like, I don't know, surviving cancer if they literally cannot step outside and breathe the air because of the toxic fumes caused by like climate change?
I think that perfectly leads into the next point on environmental like effects, so that also will be integrated into this. I think the majority of their benefits of like environmental things, like, oh, at least now you can like breathe the air and a lot of resources, all like 100% rely on the fact that being born in this world means being born into like an economically developed, democratic, safe country. If you look in so many countries, like specifically in Asia, they don't have breathable air, and so many like impoverished countries don't have access to resources. So I think it's just a game of chance and like rolling dice. Will I be born into like New Zealand where I've got breathable air and resources, or will I be born into like a war-stricken country with non-breathable air and not enough water to go around? I think it's like completely like unfair for us to then have choose as well for the tiny chance that you might be put in a good situation. I think if you think of it like when you're getting on a plane, you know planes have crashed, but you're not sitting on that plane like this plane's going to crash. Most people on a plane, like, yes, I saw in the news that last week the plane crashed, but this one won't because that's just unlikely to happen. But do you know who else saw that? The people that were on the plane that crashed last week. No one like genuinely thinks they're going to be put in a situation as bad as that. The fact is planes do crash and people are on those planes and those people's lives are affected. I think saying that like at least now we have breathable air is a very privileged position to take when so many people don't have breathable air now. And I think as we talked about technological advancements and learning more, like this ever since like the Industrial Revolution, when now we're seeing like more and more how the environment has been affected by things like that. But this is now the time where people are able to like stand up and make movements towards like improving that. And by being born 100 years later, we're way bettering the chances of us being able to live in a society where even more people have breathable air, and then like no matter if we're born into like a LEDC country, we still have a way bigger chance of having breathable air and like important resources they talk about. They talk about like one-child policies and how that was so bad because of like aging populations. For one, I'm not really sure like where this fit in. I don't know if I'm like missed a part. But then like I think it was the second speaker that said like, oh, the one-child policy is gone. The one-child policy being gone now is like direct proof that like things change over time. The one-child policy wasn't good for the people in the country because they just like didn't like it because people have like a biological want to have more children. Although I do think it's more prevalent on the side that people wanting to have less children because of cost of living, etc. But like people like that's just more direct proof towards our case that there will be more benefits. So I think at the end of the day, like even if you like believe there's going to be no benefits to climate change or violence, etc., I think we still have like the definite benefits of technological advancements, but also we've got the possible benefits. Here we don't have the possible benefits. Instead, we have like the possibility of being born into a home where you don't know if you're going to be bombed that day on your way to school. But on our side, where we have the possibility of there being more unity, as we already characterized. Proud to affirm.
The year is 2125 and you are born. But when you grow up, your house is underwater because climate change has melted all the icebergs. You don't have a job because AI has taken it all over. And you don't have a family because now there are restrictions in place because of overpopulation. Is this the world that we want to live in? Two main points of clash I've identified in this debate. First of all, one around what role do technological advancements play in this debate? And second of all, what type of changes will society undergo within 100 years to improve the quality of life? But first of all, I would like to clarify something that I think has been miscommunicated within this debate. And it is, this move does not say that people will have the individual chance to live in 100 years or not. This is simply saying that this house would prefer to live in 100 years. We are not giving individuals the right to choose. And second of all, it is not our burden to prove why things change on our side of the house because we stand for the status quo. we stand for things that already prove and exist in our world that we can see. On to my first point of clash. What role do technological advancements play in this debate? We hear that technological advancements are so great because it allows us to explore Mars and Jupiter and outer space, and this will give purpose to people's lives. I have two main responses to this. First of all, how dare you, when people are suffering, when human rights are at risk, when the world's quality is declining, how dare you say, yes, space exploration is so great because look, you can go into space, you can go see Jupiter and Saturn. This is not a priority of ours. In no world should space exploration be a priority when human rights are at risk, when the fundamental rights that we as human beings have are in danger. Especially when we think that this kind of technology and this exploration to outer space will exclude minorities, because this is something that we have seen has existed in the past and will continue to do so until big systematic change happens, which has not been proven under your side of the house, which means that you cannot claim that these people who we care about, these minorities, these vulnerable people, will be impacted by this in any way except for negatively, which means that Affirmative is weighing out vulnerability for their side in this aspect of the debate. And second of all, we think that the technological validity will be compromised in a world where political issues abound, which is something we have proven on our side and AF has failed to disprove. I will take a point of interest.
Your second speaker said that medicine will get more elitist and this will only get worse in the future. However, paracetamol in the past only the rich could afford. Now it is available in every single pharmacy. Why would this innovation trend not continue with time?
I think we have talked about the current political changings of the world. Even your third speaker has recognized that politics and the ways that people's ideals and values change as society changes. And so I think that something as simple as paracetamol isn't really a big factor in this debate. We think that we are focused on a lot bigger issues, which could very much be impacted by the way that our world's politics are changing. On to my second point of clash about what type of changes will society undergo in the next 100 years to impact the quality of life. We hear from the third speaker that people will not vote for another Trump and that Trump will not be around in 100 years, which means that all of these, detriments on our side of the house will not exist in 100 years. I have four responses to this. First of all, Trump is seeking re-election. I think that, just the fact that he is seeking re-election means that he thinks he has a chance of getting back, of succeeding, of becoming president again. Second of all, he is still approved in the polls. There are still people who vote for him. There are still people who support him. You cannot stand here and say that people will not vote for him because there are people who endorse his behavior. And this kind of acceptance within our society it signifies a change of viewpoints. It shows that people are willing to accept these outrageous, incredibly dehumanizing behaviors that are coming from one of the most powerful people in the world. Third of all, we think that people like Trump or people inspired by Trump will continue to exist for 100 years. We don't think that just because Trump dies or just because Trump becomes out of office, all of a sudden everyone's viewpoint changes. Nobody thinks that anyway. We think that he is a very inspirational figure and that he is very dangerous because of the way that he influences people's ideals. Fourth of all, the things that he is doing now will have an impact in 100 years. Just the fact that he has shattered the trust of Americans and people around the world will continue to have long-lasting impacts on the way that people perceive politicians and the way that people behave for years and years. We hear more that overpopulation will not be an issue because people die and China restricts births for families. I think we've heard a bit of rebuttal from Yane, but I would just like to expand on this a little bit more. Restricted births are not what we want to see in our world. We do not want to see our world at a point where we have to stop people from having kids. We have to restrict the amount of family a person can have. This is not a benefit on your side of the house. It is a detriment. We think that people want purpose in life, that people want a freedom, and restricting their choices in terms of families, in terms of what they do with their lives, is not something that is good. We care about purpose in life and we care about freedom, and this is not something that can be claimed while you are simultaneously claiming restricting birthing as an action on your side of the house. We hear about resources for long-term change, and innovation takes time, and that you have sufficiently told us why. I have three responses to this. First of all, corruption. Yes, innovation takes a long time, and this is partially due to the hinders it faces from corruption, from people in power not doing their jobs the way they are supposed to. We have not heard why this will change. We have not heard why every single person in power who is corrupt or who is destroying human rights at the moment will all of a sudden have a big revolution, go, what I'm doing is so wrong, and change and decide we are going to do everything for the better now. Second of all, the scale of damage. In 100 years, do you really expect us to believe that every single problem you are claiming we have on our side of the house will be better? We, in fact, think that it is symmetrical, if not worse, as reasons that my previous speakers have explained. We think that symmetry cannot win a debate. Please note that the third speaker has said that many of the detriments faced on the side of the house are symmetrical. We are saying that these are, in the best case, they are symmetrical, but in the worst case, they are worse on their side of the house. We hear a lot about the fact that people can reflect on their mistakes and fix them. We hear, I would say to this that we've had thousands of years to reflect on our mistakes. Humanity, we have not been doing good, right? I don't think anyone can really look back on our long history and say, yeah, I'm so proud to be a human being. Look at all the genocides we committed. Look at all the people who died. Look at all the people who were oppressed and hurt for years and years and years. If we've had so long to reflect on our history, why has nothing changed? Why are we still facing all of these issues in our society? And why in 100 years will all of them be absorbed? We have not had enough material from AF to actually prove why this will happen. Furthermore, just on the whole bit about addiction and how this is apparently something that will just stop because people realize that they can't spend their whole life in Instagram Reels, I don't think that AF understands how dangerous addiction it is, how dangerous it is a disease. They think that people will get off Instagram Reels to go provide for their family, but we see that people who are alcoholics do not provide for their family. People drink their life away. People drink their child's life savings away because they are addicted. We hear so much more material from AF about how people are less likely to be born into adversity, how people will gain an in-depth understanding and knowledge, yet we persist in saying that we have not gotten a proper mechanized explanation on why exactly this will happen. Therefore, on our side of the house, we can claim certainty. We can claim, yes, human life right now is not the fantastic, amazing way we want it to be, but we are certain that it is not as horrible as it could be in 100 years. We know that it can be a lot worse in 100 years. We think that the severity on our side of the house is much disproportionate to ours, and therefore we win this debate.
Building an entire case and believing that you can beat us on like material that you have not interacted with is the complete standpoint of the side affirming. Okay, two main points of clash. What type of change are we actually likely to see in this 100-year period? One main point of clash with two sub-points. Firstly, on the resource depletion. Secondly, on technological advancement. Thirdly, on our political shift. And then lastly, I will talk about what material actually has not been interacted and therefore still stands for us at the end of this debate. Okay, what do we actually have for things under resource depletion? We gave you a lot of material explaining that there is going to be an increasing population, maybe not in the next generation, but the generation thereafter, which is what this 100-year time period is going to constitute or fall under. We gave this the removal of this one-child policy. I think it still stands because we literally prove that people are just going to have more children. There has been no contest on the fact that people are going to just start having more kids. They've just accepted it. We also explained on this resource depletion on how people have infinite desires. This was brought out all the way at the start at first. They have infinite desires. The world has a finite amount of things. The only actual responses we heard on resource depletion was there's a small chance that we could find a planet with infinite things, or it won't happen because we have an aging population. Both of these I already rebutted and explained that they are not valid within this debate and they completely fall out. So we have immediately won that first point of clash. Secondly, on the technological advancement, we heard that they are going to have more knowledge, which means they're going to have more technology without giving us any valid reasons as to where they're going to get these resources from to develop this technology, right? They've not actually proved how they get more information, how they get more knowledge or better technology, other than like, it's the cycle of humans. We're just going to manage to do it and figure it out. What did we actually say? We said in our world, if you do want this like technology, or if technology is a factor that you're going to consider, it's fine. It's really not that bad. That falls under my entire split point on like access to medical care, right? We like said to you that people aren't actively going out and like just dying because of whatever. We have the technology to take care of people. So I think we've won on the quality of technology, but then secondly on what advancement looks like. Like we've got the gradual advancement that we've proved. Okay, now onto politics and the like political shift of the world. We have stated, and it was agreed on site affirming, that there is this new right rebirth in global politics, right? Everyone's voting for it, and we have seen this like new dictator-esque in like form within Donald Trump, right? It is incremental increases in power and the capacity of these individuals that we think is so dangerous and that we have been trying to prove this whole time. So what is actually so dangerous and what have we proved? Well, we've proved that there's a slow increase in power, right? Which means that it's like dangerous on their side more so than ours, because like it's going to be solely country for country. I think that stands. But then what did we actually hear? They said it's not a threat under their side because people aren't going to fall for propaganda. They aren't going to elect another Donald Trump. Lara responded to this in her speech. I'm not going to bore you guys. In her speech, I'm not going to bore you. Okay, now on to what they actually didn't really interact with. They did not interact with any of our material on the like elitism that we're going to see in the medical sector in 100 years, the elitism we're going to see in the educational system in 100 years, or gave us any valid responses as to why they have any access to resources whatsoever. So I think on these three things, we have won, and what we actually win on is the scale of harm. We have a much smaller, like, worst case scenario, or much, like, safer worst case scenario, versus on their side. They have extreme, like, elitism, and for that, we win this debate.
So scared to knock the laptop off, guys. When presented with the choice, this house has to prefer to be born in a world where you have a chance for a better life, where you don't struggle in a cost of living crisis, and when you don't spend your life in a 9-to-5. This is the world we support. We refuse to believe that we accept a world where people are literally starving to death. Where negating loses here is when they provide no mutually exclusive benefits and simply accept a bad world. This means that even with the harms that they give us, we can still win because A, we have the potential for our exclusive benefits, like a higher quality of life because we have innovation, we have time, we don't have the opportunity cost of like the issues that exist in the status quo, because we provide fulfillment to these people, and because at worst, we have planet resources to go fly off to. But secondly, when you weigh our harms against the status quo, for example, in the extreme, poverty, war, famine, and the climate crisis, or even on like a lower level, like the middle class majority, international instability, access to tech, and access to medicine, we think we can still win here. These harms are far more significantly bad, and in addition to this, they've given us no alternatives to solve these problems. We've given you like a lot of material on how we can solve these issues on our side of the house. Even if you don't believe that, I think that the opportunity for there to be some potential change to these harms is what should win the debate. But we tell you that these harms don't actually occur on our side because firstly, we have innovation. Humans solve problems like human cold, make fire, get warm. But in addition to this natural urge, like I think they were very, very ungenerous in their responses here. Like we did not just say humans just inherently solve problems. We told you that they're more informed because they develop more knowledge, they have better education. But secondly, they have more time. You can't just suddenly like develop a solution to the ozone layer. But over like time, we can come up with solutions to like at least benefit this harm. Especially when there is a tangible harm in the future, humans are incentivized to make that change. change, e.g., people don't want wildfires, so they're probably going to look for an alternative to climate change, and they're in the status quo, they can't solve anything. This means that like all of their material on like this means that we can solve all of their material on the climate crisis being bad, or at least have some potential to solve it, which is still better than their world. But like, and like at worst, we like get more innovation to like solve resource depletion. Like, look, we didn't just tell you it was planet resources. We told you that like we have innovation. But even if not, planet resources will solve climate change, guys. We had no material as to why we couldn't find planet resources, so I think it's a viable solution, and that that should be a good way to solve our harms. But secondly, people are more informed and understand past harms. We told you on extremism, people have the capacity to recognize flaws, and on our side, they uniquely have time for cultural change. This looks like feminism, right? People didn't just get the right to vote overnight, and men didn't just suddenly become acceptant to women being in the high roles. They still aren't today. It takes time. At least we get the progression on our side of that passive shift. But in the worst case, on our side, they have the capacity for a revolution. People aren't just going to stand for dictatorships. This was an unreasonable characterization. On their side, the child suffers from tariff wars. They experience international uncertainty in their life. This is harmful for them. You can't prefer that world. B, on this tech addiction, look, on their side, they just don't have a comprehension of iPad kids. We think that addiction is worse, but they just don't even have the opportunity for technological development. That's a really important benefit in this debate. But we tell you, even if you don't believe all of this, the benefit of like getting fulfillment for this person should be weighed the most highly. We told you they have passion. They have more opportunity for like pursuing passions. Like AI sustainably takes jobs. Note that like there is an incentive to integrate that AI well. They aren't just going to like lose jobs. Like this means they have arts and innovation. But B, it's more likely that they're able to like have a fulfilling family life and have a fulfilling personal life. We think we have to prefer a world where we get this quality of life for our child.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech. I thank both teams for their speeches. I now invite you to cross the floor, shake hands, and leave the room so the adjudicator can deliberate. You can unplug it. No, it's fine. I'll leave it so it's like GG.
Oh, I wish I had a planet now to go to.
Oh, yeah, so
How many mic does it take to find